Hi, I'm Melissa, and I chose to do my report on poverty's impact on education. Studies show that nearly one-fifth of students nationwide are either living in poverty, attending a high poverty school, or both. Poverty negatively impacts students in a variety of ways, including equal access to the same resources that many students do. Statistics show that this disproportionately affects students of color. And I chose to explore this topic because, as a woman of color and future educator, I often think about the ways that I can help students that have disadvantages. So, uh, in order to talk about poverty in education, you have to talk about the income gap. So, according to research from the US Census in 2021, the income gap the income at the top of the income distribution was 13.53 times higher than the income at the bottom, and this was a 4.9% increase from the previous year. So this means that, or this represents 3.7 million more children living in poverty as of January 2022, which is a lot. How does this affect education? So one of the first ways it affects education is on school readiness. So, school readiness is defined as children possessing the skills, knowledge, and attitudes necessary for success in school and for later learning in life. School readiness has statistically been shown to set the trajectory for future academic success, and it's pretty critical to later academic achievement. Children living in low income households are significantly less likely to be ready for school. The consequences of early school failure are increased likelihood of truancy, dropout, and unhealthy or delinquent behaviors. Between 30 and 40% of children entering kindergarten in the United States are estimated to not be ready for school. Poverty also has a significant impact on students of color. The percentage of children living in poverty are highest for Black and American Indian, Alaskan Native children, 34% of each, followed by Hispanic children, 28%, Pacific Islander, 23%, and children of two or more races, 19%, and lowest for white and Asian children, 11%. So you can see the graph here. You can see that, like, it's pretty significant. Also impacts the quality of education. Throughout the country, high poverty districts spend 15.6% less per student than wealthier districts, resulting in lower access to resources such as individual computers, guidance counselors, and teacher helpers. So many high poverty schools don't have the resources or the teacher retention that other schools have. So this does increase the likelihood that students won't succeed. Um, in 2019, a study of high poverty schools was conducted in North Carolina, and the study found that not only did these schools fail to provide adequate and equal educational resources, but they basically just denied students a sound basic education. So, an opposing view is that high poverty, high performing, or there are high poverty, high performing schools. Um, So there's much data to support the correlation between poverty and underperforming schools. But there are some that would argue and point out that it is not impossible for these students to succeed. There are some high poverty, high performing schools that have found ways to address challenges of educating in high poverty communities. These schools develop strategies such as having effective and collaborative leaders who set high standards and encourage parent involvement. So there was a study in 2014 that was conducted on one of these high poverty, high performing schools that had set all these new standards. The students or the teachers and the faculty, like all of the principals and or the principal and everything worked together, and they made it so uh, teacher or student involvement, I'm sorry, parent involvement was super important. They really catered to creating like a safe environment for the kids, and tried not to just dismiss them and treat them as if they were not likely to succeed because of them being in low income areas. And the test scores, they performed very high. Um, the fourth graders scored proficient in reading, while 65.5% of third and fourth graders were proficient in both reading and math. The school's test scores were on par with some of the most affluent districts. Um, this is another opposing view here, the myth of the culture of poverty. So there's no denying that poverty statistically negatively impacts students, but the unchallenged biases of educators also play a role in a student's success. When educators don't dispute their own beliefs about race and class, they may start to anticipate failure. Low-income students and families are often perceived as uncaring and not valuing education the same way that other families do, but research proves this to be false. Low-income families value their children's success as much as higher-income families do. They are just less likely to attend school functions, likely due to the amount of hours they spend at work during the week. So it's super important for educators to challenge their ideas about race and class, in order to not stifle these students just because of them being from low income families. Educators must educate themselves about class and poverty in order to create an inclusive learning environment. So there's no denying that poverty impacts education and hurts communities of color, but income doesn't have to determine a student's success. When educators strive to challenge their own biases, this informs their teaching. Creating a safe and inclusive learning environment allows all students the opportunity to thrive. And this quote that I feel like kind of sums up my viewpoint. If the United States is to remain a world superpower for generations, it's incumbent upon Americans to ensure that disadvantaged students receive the same standard of education that privileged students do. So, yeah, I believe that there are lots of moving pieces. I think that educators have to try to strive to create truly inclusive classrooms where they are challenging their own biases and own viewpoints. But I do also believe that we need policymakers to um, ensure that these communities have the proper funding so that low income families have the same resources that higher income families do. So that is my presentation. Here are my references. And that's it. Thank you.